All right. Hello again, adventurers, and welcome to another exciting in-depth review. Today, I'm going to be doing an in-depth review of the first new class added to Draw Steel, the Summoner. Now, quick reminder, if you do enjoy this stuff, please like the video, subscribe to the channel, hit the bell icon to turn notifications on. All those things are super, super important. So, let's talk about this. So, the Summoner. In tabletop RPGs, there is one style of player that everybody hates, and that is the Summoner. And what I mean by that is there are some TTRPGs, like for example, in D&D, druids, and every so often you'll see it as druids or rangers will have abilities that allow them to summon, animal companions, things like that. Every so often you'll have necromancers that have the ability to raise minions and stuff like that. But the problem with that in most tabletop RPGs is it slows down combat to a crawl, because a single player's turn, depending on how complex they want to be with it, can already take anywhere from 10 to 20 minutes, depending on, what system you're playing, how many things they have to do. Then, if you give that one player 3, 4, 5, 6 other effectively characters to play, even if they're simple, well, that can increase it to the point where a single character's turn is taking half an hour to 45 minutes, and everybody else at the table is just bored out of their minds, as the Summoner is basically playing their own game and everyone else is doing something else. I made a video on this before about the idea of how summoners in tabletop RPGs can have a lot of issues and are very, very difficult to design for. And then Matt Colville and the geniuses over at MCDM come out with this Summoner class. And I've got to say, this is probably the best designed version of a minion-based class that I think I have ever seen. Yeah, let's dive into this thing. Now, this is going to be an in-depth review. And when I say in-depth, I mean in-depth. I'm going to be going chapter by chapter, sometimes page by page. I'm going to talk about the things that I like, the things that I don't like, the things I think they did well, the things I think they need to do better. But not everybody wants to sit through like an hour or 2 hour long video just to figure out if they want to buy something. So I always start out these videos with a section that I like to call Should You Buy This? And I separate potential buyers into 3 different categories. The first group is a group that I call players. Players are people that are primarily, not exclusively, but primarily going to be sitting down at a table and playing a single player character. They are going to be focused entirely on what their character is doing and don't have to worry about, running the rest of the world. The second group is a group that I call GMs. GMs are primarily, not exclusively, but primarily going to be sitting down at a table and they're going to be running the game. They're designing encounters, they're building maps, they're doing all that fun stuff that GMs do. Obviously, they're going to they are going to have different wants and needs than a player. The third group is a group that I think is often overlooked, and I call them the Lorehounds. Lorehounds may never sit down at a table, but they really enjoy the lore and the stories built into the TTRPG, and so obviously they have different wants and needs than both groups. So, should you buy this? Well, let's find out. And I got my apple juice because I'm not feeling well today. All right, so the first group. Should players buy this book? In my intro, I mentioned Summoners are the bane of most TTRPG groups, to the point where I have actively and this isn't even a rare thing. I have actively met, or I have met players who actively will avoid using summoning mechanics that are built into their class. Like they won't choose, conjure animals or something like that because they know how much it bogs down the game, and it's just not fun for anyone. So, when I heard about this summoner from my player brain, I'm sitting here going, well, Matt Colville made a really, really slick designed game. He must have done something to make the summoner class work better. And if you guys go back in my channel, I actually have an entire video where I talk about a summoner, and we kind of create the idea of, well, if I were to make my own tabletop RPG and I would put a summoner class in it, these are the things I would do to make it so it still felt like a summoner, but it didn't bog down combat nearly as much as current iterations of it do. So for players that have always wanted to have that feeling of, playing a necromancer from, let's see, Diablo 3, Diablo 4. I think there was one in Diablo 2, if I remember correctly. I can't actually remember. But those characters that kind of come in, and instead of them going through and doing all this destruction, they just kind of go, and then there's an army of minions that they just throw at everything. If that has ever been kind of your class fantasy, where you are just, the whole solo leveling style character, well, yeah, you're really cool, but a lot of times you just go for it, and then all of your minions go and just wipe out everyone. This class actually allows you to do that, and it does it in a way that doesn't bog down the game. The problem with this class, and there's actually, on the first page of the actual rules for the summoners class, there's this little thing that says Draw Steel Master Classes. The summoner is an example of a master class in Draw Steel. Master classes are intended for players who are familiar with the game and have played a few sessions already. I'm going to disagree with that in just a second here. They are not recommended for first-time players. You need to know the rules before we start breaking them on you. If you're new to Draw Steel, we recommend checking out the Dalian Tomb Starter Adventure, which includes a step-by-step tutorial on how to play the game and breaks down all the working parts of a hero. Save Broadhurst first, and then you hurry back here. They're 100% right in the idea that this is not a class for someone that has never played Draw Steel before. If you do not only do you need to understand Draw Steel, how to play Draw Steel, you also have to understand how minions work in Draw Steel. Now, a GM, you have to understand how minions work because they are a massive part of combat. I don't know, a quarter to half of the monsters that are in the Monsters book are minions. And they're excellent and they're wonderful and they make combat a ton of fun. So, the reason the Summoner class works so well is because it uses the minions rules to allow you to control a large group of foes, but you technically still treat them as a single unit in certain ways. And because of that, everything just works significantly easier, significantly faster. Minions are specifically designed to run quickly and smoothly, and that's all of your different things that you get to summon, or almost all. We'll talk about that later. You do get one super powerful summon that isn't a minion, and in the description of it, it specifically states this creature refuses to be referred to as a minion. So eventually you get one of those too. But this does allow you to be able to do that. But again, you really, really have to understand how Draw Steel works from a mechanical perspective, because you are going to be abusing those mechanics constantly. There's 4 different flavors of Summoner. And one of them, the Fey Summoner, is really built around a control style playstyle. If you're not familiar with the term, I actually got it from 4th edition D&D, which Draw Steel takes a lot of inspiration from. But it's something that has existed long before 4th edition. What a control style character is it's a character that instead of doing damage or healing or something like that, their entire focus is on control. They do things like they might, put conditions onto the enemy. They, a lot of times control style players will move enemies and allies around. Like they are kind of battlefield masters. That's the whole idea behind control, is you're not actively doing anything that's going to kind of win the battle. What you're doing is you're setting everybody else up to do significantly better. And the Fey Summoner is built around that. Like all of the minions have these little aura effects that when the minion is next to an enemy or next to an ally, it does this or this happens. And so you have to understand positioning really well to be a summoner. You have to understand all the different conditions really well to be a summoner. You have to understand the mechanics of how things work in order to be a summoner. You have to understand action economy and how minions fit into that in order to be a summoner. But if you're willing to do that, holy shit, is this not one of the coolest classes I've ever seen? Your basic, basic kind of economy that you do is at the beginning of combat, you summon some of your signature minions. They just show up. And then at the start of every turn, you get to summon more minions for free. And then you can use your action to summon minions, or you can use your action to do other things, or you can use your action to have your minions do crazy things. Like, it's real, and your minions act on their own as well. So you don't have to use your action to do things, but if you do use your action to do things, then your minions do even crazier things than they normally would do. It is nonsense levels of crazy. But because of how it's designed, as complicated as it sounds, and as complicated as it will be the first time you do it, once you get a few combats under your belt as a summoner, you are going to just be lying back and going, okay, you do this, and it's going to feel so natural for you. As it levels up, you get access to more kind of interesting and powerful summons that cost more essence. Essence is your heroic resource. And you also will get specific abilities that allow you to actively do things on your own. So you're not entirely reliant on your summons. Yeah, like it's fascinatingly cool. So, should players buy this? Well, if you want to play the summoner, you have to buy it. However, in addition to the rules for playing a summoner, there are some new magic items. Effectively, they call them treasures. There's some new treasures that are in here that are specifically designed for summoners, but they can apply to other things there. There's new titles in here, which are cool as well. And they also have a new retainer. Retainers are an aspect of Draw Steel. Basically, as your party and as your character gets more and more popular and more well-known, you earn this resource called Renown. And once you reach certain Renown levels, you can actually you can recruit what are called followers. And the summoner actually has an aspect to it where you are allowed more followers than other classes because of your whole minion master thing. One of the follower types you can have is what's called a retainer, which is basically an extra character that gets to go with your party into combat and stuff like that. You get to play two characters instead of one, effectively. And so they actually have some new retainers. Specifically, there are retainer minions, basically versions of the summons that you have that you can basically turn into retainers using some of the stuff that's built into the summoner class. Or they actually have a retainer called a rival summoner, which basically would allow someone in the party, if no one wanted to actually be the summoner, someone in the party could have a rival summoner uh, retainer, and then you guys would all kind of get a chance to kind of flirt with the summoner stuff without having to go full on to the summoner. The PDF for this, I don't think there's a print version of it anywhere. It was released on Black Friday. The PDF version of it is $15. Do I think there's enough in here for players to play around with for $15? Hell yes. It's an entirely new class. Despite the fact that Draw Steel does not have any quote-unquote multi-classing abilities in it, so you're not going to be able to like multi-class into the summoner to, kind of customize characters like you would in something like D&D or like Fabula Ultima. Every time they add a new class, it massively changes what you can do because the game is built around multi-classing. So this isn't going to interact with other classes from a player perspective, but there's so much stuff here. Like literally just choosing a different subclass for the summoner massively changes how you play it. Even more so than the other classes where like a different flavor of null, like one version of null is real good at like throwing people around while another one is really good at grappling. It doesn't massively change how you play the class. It just kind of gives you benefits to certain play styles. This one, a Circle of Blight summoner, which is a demon summoner, plays exceptionally different to a Circle of Graves summoner, which is a necromancer, basically. So there's a lot of replay value in this, and it's $15 for a single class. I don't know, $15 is kind of pushing it for me. I did an in-depth review of the Illrigger, which was another MCDM custom class, but that was specifically for D&D instead of Draw Steel. And yeah, paying $15 for a single class still doesn't feel exceptionally great, but there's so much to this. I mean, the document itself, this is an over 60-page document to be able to play the summoner. So it's not like you're just getting like, oh, here's 10 pages and a new class. Like there's a lot here. So I definitely think $15 is worth it if you're interested in playing a summoner. If you're never going to play the summoner, there's no reason to get this. It's not going to benefit you in any way, shape, or form unless you're actively playing a summoner. So, moving on. The second group. Should GMs buy this book? So, I get to get it out of the way. If you want to play the summoner, you got to buy this. And if one of your players wants to play the summoner, you need access to this. Maybe you don't need to own it on your own, but you need to be able to read this so you can understand what it is that they can do. Because again, this is one of the most complicated classes I have ever seen. And I'm not saying that as a bad thing. Like, this isn't like GURPS level or like Pathfinder 2nd Edition levels of complicated where there's just all these different things that are constantly changing and then no, it's just it interacts with every aspect of the combat system. And a lot of other classes just simply don't. They will have certain aspects of the combat system that they specialize in and that they focus on. And then the other stuff is kind of delegated to other classes. This one touches a little bit of everything. So from a GM perspective, this really isn't going to give you specifically a whole lot of additional tools that you can use in every single Draw Steel game that you're running. The new treasures and the new titles are really geared more towards rewarding summoners. It doesn't mean that you can't give them to non-summoners, but a lot of them, a summoner is going to be required to get the most use out of them. The new retainer versions of summons are very, very interesting, because, well, let's put it this way. Again, one of the summoners uh, is a demon summoner. So the idea of your players getting a demon retainer, like there's going to have to be some pretty interesting story points to come up with a reason for that. But and retainers are not technically an optional rule, but they do specifically state in the follower section for the Draw Steel Heroes book, they specifically state if you're running a large party, having every single player have their own retainer just makes things too complicated. So the GM can say, okay, the party itself only gets one retainer, or no retainers. You guys are too large of a party. You don't need extra people. So there may be times when you just simply don't want retainers to be a part of the Giga game. But if you're running a smaller group, or even something like you theoretically can use the retainer stat blocks as just slightly more complex NPCs. Like there's a lot of really interesting stuff in here that allows you to do some pretty cool, interesting stuff. Like, yeah, I mean, there's just cool stuff in here. So, but again, almost all of it is going to be entirely based around the summoner. So if you're interested in it, there's really not a whole lot here. I mean, there's a section at the end called Summoner Advice, and they have a section called For Directors that gives you some more kind of tips and tricks on how to deal with a summoner and how to challenge them and things like that. And they also have some rules for how to convert the minions into just regular monsters. So theoretically, all the different really, really cool minions in here, you can use this as kind of a secondary monster manual, and be able to add a bunch of really interesting monsters to and kick counters. So there is, I guess, a decent amount of other stuff in here for GMs. But again, the thing that's going to give you the most bang for your buck out of this is if you have a player that wants to play a summoner, you're going to need this. You're going to have to read up on it just as much as they are. And you will learn the game very quickly when you're dealing with a summoner, because you have to. On the other end of the spectrum, if you're a GM and it's looking like you might be able to play in a game of Draw Steel, the summoner class almost feels like it was intended for GMs. Because again, as a GM, you're already familiar with how minions run because you have to run them. You already should be relatively familiar with how the system itself runs, and how maps work and all that other stuff. Like, this is all stuff that you have to know as a GM, and the summoner is rewarded for knowing all that stuff. So, like, this is the perfect class for a forever GM to play in a one-shot or something like that, and make, especially if you're playing, like, you just have, like, one of the players goes, hey, you know what, maybe I'll run a one-shot, so you finally get to play. You will be able to just show off to all of the players by running a really unique summoner build. So, yeah. So, do I recommend it? Again, for $15? It's hard to say no. Each one of these subclasses has 6 minions at level 1. 6 different minions at level 1. So times 4, that turns into what? 24? Right. So just your first level features are going to give you 24 new creatures that are very, very basic. But there's rules in here for turning them into, like, just regular monsters you can throw at your players. And then it goes up from there. So just that alone, I think might be worth the $15. And then everything else that you can kind of get in here, and the directions on how to kind of challenge a summoner and what kind of stories will kind of lean into their class fantasy. I could definitely see justifying $15 for this. Again, it always feels a little bit weird when, like, I have a custom class that I made for D&D. I have 2 different ones. I think my recommended price for them, I want to say it's like $2 because I undersell my stuff. For me, like a class with like 3 subclasses, which is what I generally tend to build, I would say somewhere between like $5 to $8 is what I would charge for something like that. So this is more than double what I would to charge. But to be blunt, this is well more than double the amount of content I have in any of my classes. Like, I believe the Dragon Knight might be like 12 or 15 pages. This is over 60. So this is 4 times as much writing and stuff and mechanics, and it has really cool art and stuff like that. So yeah, I can justify $15 for this pretty easily. So moving on. There goes my apple juice. So now I need my water. The third group. Should Lorehounds buy this book? Draw Steel is a very mechanics-heavy game. Because of that, almost every page of a Draw Steel book is going to have a lot of mechanics on it. And that generally can be a bad thing for Lorehounds, because that means that, we're not going to get as much lore because they have to explain how this relatively complex game works. Well, in The Summoner, page 1's the cover, page 2 is the credits, page 3 is a foreword, page 4 is the table of contents, and then pages 5 and 6 are just lore. That's it. Out of there's no mechanics on it whatsoever. It's just a story about a summoner, and then kind of where the different circles come from, what they're known for. So the first thing you learn in this document is the lore behind the summoner. And that kind of goes through everything in here. Every single choice that you makes has a lore reason behind it. Now, the lore gets kind of absorbed by the mechanics as well. Like, you might get a sentence or 2 of lore, and then a bunch of mechanics, paragraph mechanics, and then another sentence or 2 of lore, paragraph mechanics. So you do, if you want to get all the lore out of this, you do actually have to read through all the mechanics. And the mechanics are just not your thing, you're probably not going to enjoy this. But if you're okay reading the mechanics because they kind of feed off the lore and the lore feeds off the mechanics, there's a lot of really interesting things in here. For example, at 8th level, one of the features that the summoner gets is called Portfolio Champion. This is your super special summon. It isn't a minion anymore, and it does really cool stuff. You could only summon them once per combat, and they take 9 essence to be able to summon. So it's a huge investment. I want to give you an example of one of the things. So again, there's 4 different flavors of summoners. There's the Necromancer. There's the Circle of the Blight, which is a demonologist. There's the Phase Summoner, which summons all these different phase creatures. And then the last one is an Elemental Summoner, which summons little elementals. When I was a kid, I was obsessed with elemental summoners. I don't know why. I wrote a story for a creative writing prompt in 6th grade, uh, where this kid effectively got isekai'd into a video game and was a summoner, and he would summon a fire elemental. And I just thought that was the coolest thing ever. So the idea of an elemental summoner really kind of interests me. This is the elemental portfolio champion. Let me just read you the initial description. Your champion is a portent of a dragon yet to manifest. Through defending the innocent, you have made yourself and your elementals a close neighbor to the malice that threatens them. The dragon desires you bring their creation about and lends you strength to see your justice through. As a harbinger of ruin, the dragon's portent has incredibly potent impact and control of the environment. Their final shape has yet to be determined. Use this to your advantage and call upon the affinity that will end the conflict the quickest. Your portfolio champion as an elemental summoner is a dragon that is yet to manifest. And that's what I mean, where they put so much lore into these things, but you have to read through the mechanics to get to the lore. But if you're willing to do that, you get really, really cool stuff. And again, that is just one of the portfolio champions. Each one of the portfolio champions is massively cool. And each minion that you could summon is massively cool. Like, it's just nonsense levels of cool. So yeah, again, for $15, there's a lot of good stuff here. There's tons of amazing artwork in here. Most of the minions, not all, probably about, I don't know, maybe about like a half to a quarter of the minions in here have their own artwork. There are full page bits of artwork all over that are just absolutely gorgeous. It's insane how cool this book is. So can I justify $15 for a Lorehound to read the stuff that's in here? Yeah, I think there's $15 worth of stuff in here, especially if you like that idea of, you know, a character who summons, you know, undead or primal forces or demons or fey creatures and has them kind of interact with the world for them. Like, you can get a lot of cool stuff out of this. So yeah, moving on. All right, so quick recommendation recap. For players, if you want to play a summoner, you got to buy this, and you should want to play a summoner. This is a phenomenally cool class, but it is a complicated class. You're going to have to do your homework to be able to play this. If you're willing to do that, I highly recommend it. For GMs, again, if one of your players wants to play this, you have to buy it. But there is enough interesting stuff in here, including the idea that they do have mechanics for turning all of the minions that show up in here into regular monsters. So that in and of itself is useful. And if you ever want to play, you are going to have such a leg up compared to any player when stepping into the summoner's role. This is the perfect class for that one time you get to stop being a forever GM and you get to actually sit down and play. And then for Lorehounds, there is a surprising amount of lore in here. The only problem with it is some of it is mixed into the mechanics. So if you are very anti-mechanics and you just want to read, you know, the cool stories and look at all the art, you may not be able to justify $15 for this. But if you're not vehemently against reading mechanics and you don't mind reading them as they relate to the lore, you're going to get a lot of really interesting stuff out of this. So definitely a recommendation. So that is the recommendations. If that's all you came here for, thank you so much for tuning in. In the comments down below, what is your opinion of summoners in general? Whether you're a GM, a Lorehound, or a player, Do you like the idea of summoners? Have you ever had like a summoner in one of your tabletop RPGs that worked well? Do you have summoner horror stories? Let me know in the comments down below. Otherwise, it's time for us to get into this in-depth review. Now, as a reminder, this in-depth review is going to be exactly that, in-depth. I am going to go chapter by chapter, sometimes page by page. I'm going to talk about the things that I like, the things that I don't like, the things I think they did well, the things I think they need to do better. However, I know all of you guys have lives. I don't, but other people do, I've heard. So, in order to make this slightly easier to palette, I do put timestamps into all of these things. I know a lot of people don't want to listen to my droning, stuttering voice for 2 hours. So I put timestamps in there. I know YouTube would prefer me to say, no, watch it all in a row. Watch it 7 times. I'm just not that. So use the timestamps for this specific thing. I'm going to be timestamping by level and then by section after we're done with the summoner itself as we talk about the other stuff in here. So feel free to kind of watch parts that are interesting to you or watch it in pieces and do it over a couple of days or a week or something. It doesn't matter, whatever is easiest for you. That being said, it's time for us to dive into this in-depth review. The first section, the summoner. So, just like every TTRPG book is going to have that first opening section of what mean TTRPG? What strange thing with number on it? Is this clicky math rock? In a good TTRPG, the first thing that you're going to be given when you're talking about the class, they're going to kind of describe the class, give you an idea of lore-wise, what is this? In the PHB 2014, the 5.0 version of D&D, every class would have 3 separate stories that generally were like a couple paragraphs long that basically described the 3 different subclasses or 3 different versions of the class that you were about to learn about. And then they would have, after those 3 little stories, they would have another section that just kind of describes the overall lore. The new version of it, you get a single paragraph that kind of gives you a hint, and then you have to fill in the rest. I'm not particularly fond of that. For Draw Steel, each class gets a few paragraphs, so it's more than 5.5, less than 5.0. For the Summoner, you get a full 2 pages of nothing but lore. It starts off with just kind of describing the class, describing the 4 different subclasses, effectively. Circle of Graves, Circle of Storm, Circle of Blight, Circle of Spring. And they even hint at some of the kind of higher level stuff you're getting to deal with. And then the second part, and that takes up half a page. The remaining page and a half is just a story. And it starts out like this. On Summoning is what it's called. He obeyed 2 masters, the one who loved him, the one he protected, would protect with his life, and she protected him. Beyond certainty, he knew they would protect each other in every way that mattered. She was the other half of him. And the other, the one he feared, the one with power, the one who burned with hate. This one, too, he must obey. Their relationship was complex, the 3 of them. Sometimes as 2 masters fought, barked at each other, much anger, and he knew it was his place to sit and watch. When the barking was over, there would be purpose, and he would make them proud. They were a good team. And it goes on from there. Really interesting, kind of choppy, to be perfectly honest. The number of fragmented sentences was kind of interesting. But that's MCDM, that's Colville. So you have this really interesting, very, very detailed, very well-written narrative that gives you the insight into a summoner character, a specific summoner. So that in and of itself, I find absolutely fascinating that that's how they choose to open it up. Again, one of my biggest issues with 5.5 and quite a few other TTRPGs is the lack of lore built in, because when I'm building a character, I want to get excited about the character. I want something that is effectively going to be like a trailer for what I'm going to be playing later on. Something that's going to inspire me to want to play this class. And this does that. It's so cool. It's so interesting. I wish we had more of this in the Draw Steel Heroes book. And I'd really like, for Draw Steel Crack the Sun, they're going to be introducing, I can't remember for the life of me what they call it, but their version of the Ranger. I would love to have something like this for the Ranger as well, because it gives you a wonderful insight into the class itself. And I think that is really, really important. I think that's something that D&D has lost, and quite a few other TTRPGs that tend to focus significantly more on mechanics than they do on story. I think that's something that is missing. So many TTRPG designers come at it exclusively from a mechanics standpoint, because they know people are going to homebrew and people are going to reflavor and all this stuff. And so they're like, well, we don't want to get in the way of that. So we're just going to give you the mechanics. You can put whatever lore you want in there. And I think that's doing a big disservice. Just because there's already built-in lore doesn't mean you can't reflavor it. It makes reflavoring slightly more interesting depending on how much the lore is connected to the mechanics. But I think you do a huge disservice if you don't give them, hey, this is the default version of it. This was it. This is what we designed it to do. Now, you can play however you want, but this was our intent behind it. And it does give you a little bit more of, I say this in, it's one of my rules of training. The why is more important than the what. Simply having the mechanics, the what, isn't that useful if you don't understand why those mechanics are the way that they are. And so by introducing lore that connects to the mechanics, you introduce the idea of the why as well. Now, it's not going to be the only why. There are also mechanic why reasons that generally won't be explicitly stated in the class. You have to kind of learn about the game to find out, oh yeah, in D&D 5th edition, action economy is really, really important. So anytime you add an additional character with additional actions to combat, you massively change how the game is balanced. That's why the original version of the Beastmaster Ranger was shit. So you're never going to get the entirety of the why. But this lore and this introduction is such a great way to start introducing that why into the class. So yeah, for 2 pages, it's a fantastic 2 pages. Moving on. The first level. So, the other thing that I find absolutely fascinating about Draw Steel, from a game design perspective, when I was first designing my first custom class for D&D 5th edition, I had a friend who is actually a playtester for Wizard of the Coast. Like, before we saw stuff in Unearthed Arcana, they had already not only looked at it, but they had a table that they actually did playtesting for, and they would send the stuff back. So they're an actual playtester for Wizard of the Coast and have been for a decade at this point, over a decade, I think. And so I kind of showed it to this friend because I knew that they were good. And the first thing that he told me was the idea that in 5th edition D&D, every class has what we call a defining feature, something that class does that makes that class feel and play completely different than the other classes right from level 1. And in order, the kind of thought process behind class design in 5th edition is all of your defining features of the class should show up in the first 2 levels. You won't always get all the defining features at level 1 because you do want to keep things somewhat simple for level 1. But once you get to level 2, you have all the things that define your class. And one of the problems that my Dragon Knight class had was it didn't get one of its defining features until level 3, and that caused some issues. So I kind of revamped it and got it to work, and that did. But that has flavored my view of class design ever since then. Every class in a well-created RPG should have the defining aspects of the class. Not the most powerful abilities, but the kind of thing that makes you want to play the class. There should be some aspect of it right from the beginning, whether it's level 1, level 2, whatever. Very early on in you playing this class, there should be something that's kind of like, this is why I play this class. In Draw Steel, they have mastered that idea. You can get the idea behind the entirety of any one of the classes in this game by just going through their level 1 features. And I love that. It doesn't mean that the classes don't get cool stuff after level 1. But the core essence of the class is contained so epically, perfectly in your first level features that you can literally ignore everything else in this book, not read anything from second level on, and you will still have a pretty damn good idea of what the summoner class is about just from reading the first level stuff. The basics of it's a reason-based character, so that's their like main stat. They technically don't get access to standard kits, so they are a caster-based class. You eventually do, once we get to Chapter 3, we'll talk about their specific summoners kit. And the subclass, they call it their summoner circle. And as I've mentioned before in here, there are 4 different flavors. You have the Circle of Blight, which are demonologists. You summon demons, and when we get to the signature minions, we'll start talking about mechanically how each one of these things is different. But your Circle of Blight is your demon summoners. Circle of Graves, necromancer. That's the artwork on the front of the document. When most people think of a summoner style class, a lot of times you're either thinking of an elemental summoner or a necromancer. So Circle of Graves, you're going to have undead minions that do weird shit. Circle of Spring is probably the most unique of the subclasses, which is, I'll just read it to you. You are a Feybright who beckons pixies, nixies, and sprites from Arcadia. I've never heard the term Feybright, but it's instantly recognizable exactly what it is. It's someone that kind of converses and controls Fey spirits. And it's such a unique class. Again, we'll get into the mechanics of it in a little bit, but it's so cool. And then Circle of Storms, you're an elementalist. Except instead of throwing fireballs at anyone, you animate fireballs into fire people that go and destroy things. It's massively cool. Again, when I think of Summoner, that's the first thing I think of. To the point where the first MMORPG I ever played was EverQuest. And the first class that I really got excited about, that I had to play this class, I believe it was called, was it the Mage? What were they called in that? What was it called? And this is early. Yeah, that's what it is. It was the Magician. So the Magician summoned elemental pets, and I thought that was the coolest thing in the world. That's what the Circle of Storm is you get to summon all of these different elementals, which is really, really cool. How does it work? Well, the minion system, which is the next section in here, they explain how your minions work. The minion system in Draw Steel is so robust and so well designed. Effectively, minions are probably the greatest thing that 4th edition introduced to tabletop RPGs. If you're not familiar with it, in 4th edition, what a minion was they were a monster that had 1 hit point. And so what they were designed to do. They had similar strength level to like other monsters of their level. Like they did similar damage. They did a little bit less, but they had kind of similar damage. They were similarly as dangerous as other monsters, but they were designed to be run in like little hordes. And so when a lot of minions are on the battlefield, they could be very, very dangerous. But because they all died with one hit, it meant that players felt extremely powerful when going up against minions. Because you could just... and they were gone. And it massively changed how combat design worked. Because what you could do is you could have these bigger, tougher creatures and then a bunch of minions, so that the players would have to choose between, okay, do I want to kill a bunch of different guys that are doing less damage, but there's just tons of them? Do I want to try and focus on this big dude? And it created really interesting combat. Since then, the idea of minions has kind of evolved. Daggerheart has their own version of minions, which I think works even better than... minions in 4th edition, and then the minions in Draw Steel I think are probably the best flavor of minion I've seen thus far. The way minions work is they are designed to be used in groups, and in Draw Steel you organize your monsters into things called squads. And basically what that means is, instead of having 15 different monsters on the board, what you might have is 3 squads of 4 minions each with a leader in there. And that turns effectively 15 different monsters into 3 different groups of monsters that all kind of act together and synergize with each other, which is really interesting and cool. That's effectively how minions work for the summoner. You can have a maximum, at level 1, you can have a maximum of 8 minions, and they can be organized into at most 2 squads, and no squad can have more than 8 minions in it. And in any squad, all the minions have to have the same name, is what they say. So effectively, as much as you have a bunch of different minions that you will gain access to and can control, at most, you can only ever have 2 different types of minions on the battlefield. And when it comes your turn, you're generally going to be directing them in 2 different groups. Now, that doesn't mean that all of them have to attack the same target, but in general, like when I'm running combat for Draw Steel, when it's my turn to act, I control an entire group of enemies. They all go and do their attacks, and then it goes back to the players. And that'll kind of be how you run your minions. Your minions act on your turn. You can intersperse your action and your movement at the same time as theirs. There's a few other rules about how they can work and what actions they get and what actions that they don't. I'm not going to go into the specifics of it, but the basics that you need to know to understand it is, effectively, at the start of every combat, you can summon 2 signature minions for free. Those are your at-will minions, let's call them. So right as combat starts, you instantly go, ooh, we're in danger? Come on, boys. And then you've got 2 of them. So basically your first 2 squads are right there. And then at the start of your turn, you can summon up to 3 more of your signature minions. And again, mix and match. You have 2 different signature minions that you have access to. So, at the beginning of your first turn, you are going to have 5 minions on the battlefield before you do anything. And then after that's done, and of those 5 minions, you can have 2 different types of minions. After that's done, then you have your actual turn where you can summon more minions. You can have them do stuff. You have your own abilities that you can do, but the majority of the stuff you're going to be doing is your minions are going to be doing things for you. Um, uh, and you can use minions outside of combat as well. There's rules for it. I'm not going to go into the specifics, but that's how this class runs. Is everything you do is going to either be supported by your minions, or your minions are going to be doing it for you. And it still feels really, really cool. Your heroic resource is called Essence. Again, there's lots of rules about how you earn your Essence. I'm not going to go into specifics about it by the class if you want the specifics. But it just like every other class in Draw Steel, you have multiple ways to earn Essence. You will get a flat amount of Essence at the beginning of every turn, and then when certain things happen, you earn extra Essence throughout the round. So the other thing that I find absolutely fascinating is you have two different things that you can do as kind of your quote-unquote basic attack. In Draw Steel, you have these things called free attacks. Free attacks is if you're not using an actual ability, or you're doing something like an opportunity attack, something like that. That's what your free attack is. It's just generic, I do damage. In most other TTRPGs, that's your attack action. If you just do a basic attack, that's what a free... they're called free strikes, sorry. That's what a free strike is. It's just your melee basic attack or your ranged basic attack. The Summoner has two unique versions of that. They have the Summoner Strike, which actually replaces both their melee and ranged free strike. And basically what it is it does your reason score of damage. So at level 1, you're going to just do 2 damage. And you can slow the target with it. So it's a really, really simple... It's even more basic than most free strikes. Most free strikes, you have your 3 different tiers. In Draw Steel, 11 and 0 is tier 11 and lower is tier 1, 12 to 16 is tier 2, 17 plus is tier 3. And most free strikes that have 3 different versions. The Summoner free strike doesn't. It's just you do damage. There's no rolling. You just do damage, and if their reason is lower than your weak potency, they're slowed. That's all it is. So that might sound really, really boring compared to everyone else that actually gets to do something. Well, that's because you have a unique triggered action called Strike for Me. So anytime you would normally use something that would cause you to use a free strike, like an opportunity attack or something, you can use Strike for Me instead, where effectively you make a power roll, and depending on how high you roll, up to 7 of your minions just get to make their own free strike. So yes, you can attack yourself, or you can just have a bunch of your minions do the attack for you. And the only limitation is if the reason you're using is because like you got an opportunity attack, so you have to attack a certain target, then your minions have to attack that target as well. But that's the only real limitation to it. And it's such an interesting way to deal with a summoner style class. Even opportunity attacks, you can just choose to have your minions opportunity attack for you. And minions can have their own opportunity attack. So it's a really interesting way of do things. And then one of your main actions is called Call Forth, which allows you to just use your main action to summon more minions. It costs essence to do that, but you get a lot more stuff to do cool shit with. The other thing you have this maneuver called Minion Bridge, which is exactly what it sounds like. You can shift into a square adjacent to one of your minions. But and shifting is basically you can move without triggering opportunity attacks. But the interesting thing about this is you can actually shift into a square that your minion is standing in, because you're literally stepping on them. And anytime you shift into a square that your minion is standing in, you can shift again. So you literally can line up your minions so you can walk on them to get where you need to go. And this means if you're in a bad position, you're surrounded by enemies or something like that, all you need is to get some of your minions close enough to where you can walk on them to get out of it, and you get no opportunity attacks, nothing. You literally just walk on the backs of your minions to get out of the way. That is such an interesting way to really kind of show you how the summoner kind of views their minions and things like that. Like, it's just insane. After that, we get into the circle features. Basically, every subclass in Draw Steel will have certain, passive abilities that are built into it. One of the things I'm not a huge fan of as far as the layout is concerned for Draw Steel, and this is true about the Summoner thing specifically, and also in the Heroes book, is when you get to your subclass features, what they do is they'll have a table that says, like, for the Blight Circle, you get the Death Snap feature and the Soul Sense feature. Holy crap. Brain not liking me talking right now. However, they list all of the features that you might get access to in alphabetical order. So you have to kind of move around and figure out which ones actually apply to you. I think this would make a lot more sense if they just listed, these are the Blight Circle features, these are the Grave Circle features, these are the Spring Circle. Because the way they have it right now, it's just more confusing and more wordy than it needs to be. Because since there's 4 subclasses here, and each subclass gets 2 features, 6 of the 8 features here are completely pointless to you. You will never interact with them because you can't have multiple subclasses and you can't take things from other subclasses. So you have, a page, or almost like 3/4 of a page of text where the vast majority of it is completely pointless to you, but you can't just instantly know which ones are yours. You have to kind of read through each one to figure out which one is supposed to be good for you. So it's a small problem with the layout. Again, I understand why they did it. I just think it was the wrong decision. But the different things, again, they feed into the class fantasy. Like for the Graves, the 2 Summoner Circle features they have are Dead Men Tell All Tales, which is basically Speak with Dead, and then Rise. And Rise is effectively when a creature dies unwillingly within your summoner's range, which is basically how far away you can have your minions. You can use a triggered action to summon a signature undead minion in their space at no cost, even if you're at your minion maximum, but only if they can be organized into one of your squads. The new minion can't act until the start of your next turn. And this ability becomes a free triggered action if the target was a minion. So basically, anytime something dies around you as a Graves Circle, you can use that death to raise one of your minions for free. Now, it's only the signature ones, so it's your kind of base level minions, but it's still very, very, very useful. And it uses your triggered action, which you can only do once per round. So there are some limits to it, but it still means you're just getting another free summon. And if it was one of your minions, you can just summon it as a free triggered action, meaning you still could use another triggered action other ways. So effectively, that means that every time one of your minions dies, you can just replace it with a signature minion. The big limiting factor is, again, you can only have 2 different kinds of minions. So if a minion dies, but it still has like 3 friends there, you would only be able to replace it if it was one of your signature minions. So again, it gets a little bit more complicated, but it's still an interesting ability. Then you get this formation thing, which is kind of a passive bonus to how your minions work. And then you get a quick command that does crazy ass shit. Like one of my favorite quick commands you get, this is your triggered ability. Every single class has their own special triggered ability, which if you're used to D&D, it's a reaction. One of my favorite ones is called Halt. The trigger for it is the target starts their turn, moves, or is forced to move. In the effect, you summon a signature minion in an unoccupied space adjacent to the target. If the target is force moved into the minion, you can choose to make the target take no damage from the collision. So this triggered action is as soon as someone either starts their turn, tries to move, or is forced to move, you can instantly pop a minion up in front of them and stop it. So from a defensive aspect, one of your allies is about to be thrown off a cliff or thrown into a wall, which in Draw Steel actually does a remarkable amount of damage. If you watched my Draw Steel mini campaign that I ran, they loved throwing enemies into each other. Like there was two players, their entire class was built around moving enemies around the battlefield. And then there were a few other ones that had parts of their class that would allow them to do forced movement. So forced movement is a really, really big deal in Draw Steel. And this Halt ability, you just go, no. And not only will your minions stop them, but you can choose to make it so they take no damage. So you can basically cancel a forced movement using a triggered action. Or the big dudes getting ready to go towards one of your allies. You can just go, you got to get around this dude first. And depending on how large your minion is, eventually you get the ability to make them bugger. You might be able to just stop them from being able to get to your ally because you just go, bloop, yeah, deal with him. Or you will force them to move around your signature minion, which will trigger an opportunity attack from the minion, which each one of the minions has, or a lot of the minions have things that happen when they do their free strike. So it's, again, so much of this class is built around understanding the action economy, understanding conditions, stuff like that. And Halt is such a good example of just understanding how the system works makes this an unbelievably powerful ability. But if you don't understand the systems, it just kind of sounds dumb. It's like, so wait a minute, you can just summon it. Well, I guess it's a way to summon an extra minion as a triggered action. So I guess that's useful. Oh, no. There's so much more to it than just, I summon a minion. You can stop movement. You can you can force an opportunity attack effectively, or get them to waste one of their actions or attacks dealing with your minion instead of the person that they really wanted to attack. Like, this is a really, really tactical ability. Yeah. Then we get to the portfolios. The portfolios, these are every class has what's called signature abilities. In 4th edition, they were called at-will abilities. 5th edition, you might refer to these as things like cantrips for spellcasters. They're your kind of default, this is how I attack using magic. That's what your signature abilities are. Signature abilities for summoners are signature minions. You get to choose 2 of 3 minions. Another thing I'm not particularly fond of, anytime you are given a choice in a TTRPG, bare minimum, for it to feel like a good choice, you want to have at least double, if not triple, the number of options you are giving them. In this particular instance, because you are choosing 2 of 3, you're not technically choosing the 2 you like the most. Technically what you're doing is you're choosing the one that you think is the least useful and not using that one. That's how people are going to look at it. So you're changing the choice by only giving them 3 options. You're changing the choice from which of these am I most excited about to which of these am I least excited about. So I'm not a big fan of that. And that is constantly throughout this entire thing, you're getting the choice between like 2 of the 3. It is what it is. The choices themselves are still pretty interesting. And your signature minions are going to kind of define how your summoner is going to work, because the stuff that the signature minions do are just amplified as you get into the more powerful flavors of them. So the demon portfolio for the Blight Circle, you summon demons. Weird, I know, right? But the thing that these demons do involves kind of trapping and pulling targets towards them. So the demon portfolio, in and of itself, tends to be not quite as control focused as like the face as a summoner, but a lot of your minions are going to be built to kind of control the battlefield through things like taunts, through things like slowing people and pulling people around. You're kind of the movement oriented and the control movement oriented style thing. They're not exceptionally powerful at low levels, but they do give you some interesting ways to deal with stuff, which is always fun. When you get to your 3 essence minions, again, the demon summoners, some of it's going to be damage focused, some of it's going to be more kind of movement focused, but that's kind of the choices that you're going to be making with it. When we get to the elemental portfolio, this one is kind of interesting because you get the elemental moat, just a little kind of like ball of elements that you can summon, is one of your signature minions. And then you also get to choose one other minion, which is either air, fire, or earth. And each one has different things. Like the fire plume, their free strikes can attack from a distance of 10 squares. So they can attack from up to 50 feet away. They're a really nice ranged minion that you can just kind of really put almost anywhere on the battlefield, and they're always going to be able to attack. Whereas the walking boulder, the boulder obstructs line of effect for enemies. So literally, when you summon the walking boulder, one of the things you're going to want to do is you just place them in spots that make it difficult for ranged enemies to attack through them. They are literally walls that you can just put up in various places. If you get enough of them, they are literally a moving wall that you can kind of control and move as much as you want. That can also still attack, which is really interesting. Yeah, and then when we get to the 3-cost minions, the interesting thing about them is each of the 3-cost minions are a blend of 2 elements. Like the Crux of Ash is a fire and air elemental, whereas the Desolation of Sand is an air and earth elemental. And again, things like the Desolation of Sand, it doesn't provoke opportunity attacks by moving, so it's designed to be kind of hypermobile, whereas the Crux of Ash, when they make a free strike, they can actually hide allies from the target. So effectively, they come up and they attack them, and it's literally ash. Ash gets in their eyes, and they can't see the rest of your allies, which is a really interesting way to deal with a minion. Like if you have like an entire squad of these things, like you have 4 of them on the battlefield, you can spread them out so you can attack 4 different enemies, and so all of those enemies now can't actually see your allies. They can still search for them, they can still attack them, but they'd have a bane on it. But again, that's what you're kind of looking at when you're playing a summoner type class. And then we get to the Fey portfolio, and this is where things become nonsense. So your signature minions for this. The first one's called the Nixie Soakreed. Their thing is the area within 1 square of the Soakreed is filled with swampy water. An enemy that starts their turn there... Thank you, phone. An enemy that starts their turn there is slowed depending on their potency. Potency is a thing in draw steel. Basically, if their agility is lower than your weak potency, which is defined in your character sheet, then they're slowed. So with a Nixie Soakweed, it doesn't do a lot of damage. Their free strike only does 1 point of damage. So they're not massively powerful. But the thing that you do is you position them in certain places, and you basically create difficult terrain. You slow down the enemy, and if you overlap these areas of soaking bog, the potency goes up, so it makes it easier for it to affect enemies. So that's one of your minions. And again, it's not really designed to do damage, it's designed to slow down enemies. The next one, the Bell Ringer is what it's called, and the Bell Ringer's free strikes grant an edge to the next strike made against the target, or a double edge if 2 or more Bell Ringers strike the same target. This is really interesting. The way that minion free strikes work is you don't roll for them. They're just auto damage. And the strikes themselves, again, all these minions, their free strikes are 1 point of damage. They're not powerful. But with a Pixie Bell Ringer, anyone this Bell Ringer just automatically attacks, the next strike against it has an edge, which is a +2. If 2 of them attack the same target, you get a double edge, which means whatever you roll, increase the tier by 1. That is a really powerful thing to have. And again, you can have up to 8 of these creatures in a single group. So if all of your minions were Pixie Bell Ringers at any given time, you can choose 4 different enemies that they all just strike, and then the next attack against each one of these enemies has double edge. Basically, does a minimum of a tier 2 damage, possibly to tier 3. That is a really interesting thing. And by mixing and matching different things, you can have a couple Pixie Bell Ringers around, so that the enemy that really needs to be hit hard, that's what you send your pixies to. Then you have some Soak Creeds over here to slow down these people. Or your last one, the Sprite Dandinite. They have this ability where they get to choose what damage types, so it works with damage resistances and things like that. So they just do some type of elemental damage. But they can attack twice instead of once. So your Sprite Dandinite is going to be just your basic attacker. If you need to go and attack things, you can have your Dandinite go up and take advantage of elemental weaknesses and things like that. You can have your Bell Ringer over here, make it easier for your allies to attack. Then you can have your Soak Reed somewhere, slowing people down. And again, the only limitation is you can only ever, at any given point in time, have 2 different types of minions out there. But you can mix and match those 2 different types as much as you want and just treat them as 2 different groups. And that's what I mean when I talk about you really have to understand the mechanics of the game and all the different things. When we get to the 3 essence minions, the Pixie Hydrain has a ranged attack that adds the weaken condition, which gives them basically a bane on everything that they do. The Loft Lily, another 3 essence minion, every square within, basically every square adjacent to any one of these Loft Lilies causes each enemy and object with size equal to your reason or smaller to float 1 square off the ground until they leave the area. So anytime one of these pixies is there, if the enemy moves into that square or the pixie moves there, they just float 5 feet in the air, which a floating enemy that can't fly is unable to shift, moves 2 additional squares from forced movement, and has a bane on strikes. So this thing, again, the actual damage it only does 4 damage on a free strike. But the fact that you can move it somewhere and make it so that character can't shift, so if they're in a position where they would want to shift away because one of your allies is there and their opportunity attacks hurt like hell, well, now they can't shift. And if you have like a talent on your team, which they do tons of like moving stuff, well, now any forced movement is increased by 2. And the thing about forced movement is If you force move something into something that doesn't move, like a wall or another person, it does additional damage based on how much forced movement is left when they stop. That was one of the things they did constantly in my Dark Sun campaign, is they would just throw enemies either into walls or into each other and do crazy amounts of damage. This increases that, but you have to understand how your party is built up. And see, that's one of the reasons why the Fae portfolio is so crazy, is because it's built almost entirely around control, as opposed to, again, the elemental. You're getting kind of cool elemental abilities and you know, stuff like that. Whereas the demon one, you're kind of pulling enemies and creating like taunt targets and stuff like that. And then the Fae portfolio is just weird ass shit. And then when we get to the undead portfolio, more weird ass shit. One of my favorite ones, one of their signature minions is called, it's the skeleton. But the thing with it is, when the skeleton is reduced to 0 stamina, their square becomes difficult terrain for enemies. Cool. So the kind of point of using skeletons is to send them out to die. When they die, the square they were in becomes difficult terrain. That's kind of cool, kind of useful, slows down the enemy. That's not where it ends. The first time any enemy enters this space, they take 2 damage and end this effect. So literally, the ability is called Bone Traps. So literally, you have living caltrops that you send out with the express purpose of dying, so that in order for the enemy to get to you, they have to step over this thing and just keep taking additional damage. It's nonsense levels of fascinating. And I'm not going to go through every single minion, but yeah, as you start getting into higher levels, one of the things that the Grave summoner in general is a lot of times their minions have something that happens when they die. So very much, if you've ever played like a black deck in Magic the Gathering, you're going to feel very at home with the Grave Summoner, which again feeds into that class fantasy. And then we finally get the 5 essence thing, and these aren't summons. This is an actual ability that the player actually gets to do. So you're not just this passive, go my minions. You actually get to do things. But one of the things you get to do, one of the 5 essence. Now this one, you choose 1 heroic ability for 5 essence, and there is a total of 6 choices. So this one actually gives you a pretty decent choice. One of the choices is called Explosive Parade. Your power roll designates how many minions you summon. You can summon up to 6 with this ability. Doesn't matter what your maximum minions are, because they're not going to last very long. You summon the minions, they move up to their speed, and then when they get where they're going, they explode. So all they do, you summon them, they go, they explode. If somebody is stupid enough to make an opportunity attack, they explode early. And the explosion does damage and forced movement. And so if you understand the battlefield, you just place your minions, and if multiple minions explode and like an enemy gets multiple, all of that stuff is put together. So if you have like 3 minions that all explode and there's an enemy there that gets all 3 explosions, they take 6 damage and are pushed 3 squares. And you can choose the direction. Like, push means it has to move away from them, but it doesn't have to move directly away. You have some leeway with where the push goes. And so you could push them into another enemy and just like it is a nonsense, crazy ability that I find fascinating. And then there's other things like Essence Transfer, where effectively you do damage and you can either use it to spend a recovery, either yourself or other people. You drain energy from the enemies so that you and your allies can heal. You can give your allies surges, which is basically just extra damage. Or you can just summon minions by draining enemies. Like, it's such an interesting thing to do, and massively changes how the class plays. This one 5 essence ability turns you into a battlefield healer, But at the exact same time, you can use it to simply soup up your allies to give them more and more power, or you could just use it to summon a bunch of additional minions. Like, and that's literally, as you just go through all of these things, like that's what you're looking at with the summoner, is that this is how this class plays. You're going to be giving options to do weird ass shit, and then continually get new ways to do that weird ass shit that all go around a theme. You know, the Grave, they send their minions out to die, and then good things for you, bad things for the enemies happen. The Fae, they fuck shit up. The Elemental, they do weird ass shit with explosions and fire and earth and air. And then the demons, they're kind of your strength. Get over here. I will hit you. I will burn you. You will look in me in the eyes. Like, it's really, really cool. And that's, again, this is all first level. We haven't gotten into second level at all. Fascinating. Moving on. These will be significantly faster because, again, first level has to completely define the class. Second level and on just kind of modifies things. So, second level, you get a number of different things. Every second level, for every class at second level, you get to pick a perk. I talked about them a little bit when I talked about, I think I did it. Yeah, I did an in-depth review of the Heroes book. Basically, perks are their version of feats from 5th edition. The biggest difference is perks are almost exclusively roleplay focused or skill focused. There's very few that have any kind of combat benefits. So they're designed to kind of give you stuff to do outside of combat. So every second level character gets a perk based on their class. Like for the Summoner, you can choose an intrigue, lore, or supernatural perk. So you will have a limitation as to which perks you can choose from, but it's just a perk. The other thing you get is what's called a Summoner's Dominion. Basically, you can summon this aspect of the plane that you summon your minions from. Each one has a different thing, but it's basically you place it on the map, and it changes what happens when you're around it. For example, the demon portfolio get what's called the Boil. Every enemy that starts their turn within 3 squares of the Boil is taunted by it. What taunted means is effectively if they try to attack anything without attacking the Boil, they're going to get a bane on it. It's going to be more difficult for them to be able to do that, which is fascinating. So the demon portfolio one is, again, taunt me, you know, fight me. That's what the demons tend to do, is I'm big, I'm tough, fight me. Whereas if you look at the Fae portfolio features called the Glade Pond, you literally put a pond. You and each non-minion ally that enters one or more squares within 3 squares of the pond, or starts their turn there, has their speed increased by 2 to the end of their turn. So it makes your allies faster, which is cool. And then each of your Fae minions that ends their turns within 3 squares of the pond is hidden until the start of their next turn. So, in addition to the fact that your Fae minions all have weird-ass shit that they do when they exist, if you put the Glade Pond on the battlefield, as long as they're within 3 squares of it, the enemy can't see them without actively spending a maneuver to look for them. And all your allies get faster. So the Fae one basically makes your entire party hypermobile, and it makes it very difficult for the enemies to be able to get rid of these annoying Fae creatures that keep doing weird shit to them. And that's what I mean by just how amazing and intricate this class is. Just this thing of, I'm going to turn this part of the battlefield into this thing that complements my minions really, really well. And as you level up, your fixture gets more abilities. Like for the Fae portfolio at level 5, they get Garden of Jest. You can spend a recovery the first time in a round a creature gains or starts their turn with a condition while you have line of effect to the pond. Alternatively, you could choose to enable an ally who also have line of effect to the bowl to spend a recovery instead. So effectively, it allows you to use... that's 100% a typo. It's not the boil, it's the Glade Pond, but whatever. It allows you to use this as kind of a way to heal your allies just for free, which is really, really interesting. So, yeah. And then you get access to some new minions. I'm not going to go through every single one, but if there's a particular minion that I find really, really interesting. But you get access to some 5 essence minions. And again, you get to choose, this time it's, you choose 1 of 3. So a little bit better. So again, when we're looking at the demon ones, a lot of them are all about me, big tough. The elemental ones are weird ass shit. That can do things like inflicting restrained or other stuff like that. The Fae stuff, again, weird. And then undead, more interesting stuff. So, moving on. I literally could make this into like a 7-hour video if I wanted to go through every single minion. I'm not going to do that. But let's keep going. 3rd level features. The first thing you get is called a Summoner's Kit. If you're not familiar with kits in Draw Steel, they're basically your weapons and armor. The Summoner's Kit allows you... it increases that Summoner's Strike ability. Again, that thing where you just do auto damage and then can do weird shit to him. And then it also comes with a ward that makes you a little bit more difficult to hit. You have 4 different wards to choose from. I'm not going to go through all of them, but each one does a little bit different. Like the Conjured Ward increases your stamina, so it just makes you harder to kill. Whereas the Howling Ward, whenever you enter combat, you create this aura of vortex of slicing magic, and the enemy that starts to turn adjacent to you takes damage. So stuff like that. And then you get access to a 7 essence of ability. So again, instead of getting a new minion at 3rd level, you get a new spell that you can get to do. And yeah, again, they're because these are not limited to a subclass, you really can kind of mix and match these to create really interesting things. But it does mean that for most of these, you're going to be using your main action to do this ability and your essence to do this ability instead of summoning more minions or doing things like that. So yeah, it's 3rd level. Moving on. At 4th level, you get the following things. Characteristic increase. I believe that's another kind of standard thing. For Draw Steel is at 4th level, and then I think it's 7 and 9, maybe 7 and 10, something like that. You just your attribute scores increase. And then your minion improvement. Your maximum number of minions increases by 4. So instead of having a total of 8 minions split between 2 different groups, you can now have a total of 12 minions still split between 2 different groups. And your minions get more stamina, so they're harder to kill. And then they start kind of upgrading things like... they get this ability called Minion Chain. Remember that thing, Minion Bridge, where you can literally step on the backs of your minions? Well, now, when you use Minion Bridge, instead of having to have your minions already there, when you use the ability, your minions can shift up to their speed right before you start doing it. So they don't have to even be next to you. You can just go, you know what? I'm in a bad spot. I need to get out of here. I'm just going to go walk on my minions. And they just go shloop. And they come in. So again, interesting, unique stuff. You also get a new perk, and you get a skill. So moving on. At 5th level, you get the following things. You get some Summoner Circle features. Again, the same problem I had before, where there's technically 8 different things that you get here, but you only get access, or 8 different things listed here. You only get access to 2 of them based on your circle, and they list them. They list them alphabetically, so it's kind of annoying. But there are things like for the graves, you get Channel and Dreadmarch. Channel, effectively, you can channel a willing spirit of a creature who died in the area. While you're hosting them, you have access to their memories of the 24 hours leading to their death and any skills they knew in life. You can also magically change your appearance to look like them while they were alive. The only limitation to this ability is you can just stop channeling the spirit whenever you want. But if they've been in your body for at least an hour, you have to actually make a presence test to force them out. And if you fail, you are now possessed by a creature called a haunt. And the only way you can get rid of it is to do a downtime activity during a respite. So that in and of itself is really fascinating. Effectively, it has to be a willing creature, but as long as you can find a willing creature, like you go to a graveyard or a battlefield or something like that, you find a willing creature, you now can look like them. You can use it to infiltrate. You have access to their memories of the 24 hours leading up to their deaths. You know all that stuff and all their skills. So you can basically, with a little bit of work, you can basically impersonate someone. But if you do it for longer than, impersonate them really, really well. If you do it for longer than an hour, you may be kind of fucked. And there's so many different ways that you could use something like that. Like, it's such an interesting ability. So yeah, there's more abilities. Not going to go through all of them. You also, at level 5, you get access to new 7 essence minions. Again, 3 different menus to choose from. You get to choose one. The weird ass demons that they're getting now, like they have one. The first one that you can choose from is called a faded blightling, and the image of it is a bipedal creature that's all like pale skinned with like claws and stuff like that. But instead of like a head and shoulders, it has this massive bulbous like organ looking thing with a bunch of like either like blotted out eyes or pustules or something, and then 4 wings sticking out of its big bulbous pustule filled head. Like, that's a nonsense level of weird. Yeah. The rest of, like, a good example for the elemental portfolio, one of the things you can summon is called a Knight of Blood. And if that doesn't sound cool, maybe you want the Fey portfolio, where they have a Sprite Oleander. The description: these brawny sprites wear heavy beetle armor and have a halo hovering away from their backs where their wings used to be. The faster the halo spins, the more power the Oleander generates, enabling them to stand toe-to-toe with giants. So you literally have... Sorry, I've got, I think, like a hair in my mouse, and it's causing weird things. So you literally have this, like, beetle-looking dude with a halo on its back just punching people out. Its melee strikes inflict push 4. Which is really, really cool. So, yeah, and then Sevenunia, one of the interesting ones for the undead, False Vampire. You can just summon a fake vampire. You know, they sparkle and everything. No, not really. These are actually useful vampires. Moving on. At 6th level, you get another perk. You also get this thing called Return to the Source. You can translate yourself and your allies into the space that your minions come from as if summoning in reverse. Effectively, during a respite, instead of camping somewhere unsafe, you can suck them all back into wherever you summon your minions from. The problem with that, you will be viewed as an ally. Your allies may, it specifically says here, but your allies may be seen as intruders. So they might not be as safe as you are, but it effectively gives you a way to get a full respite without having to worry about bad things interrupting it, which is really interesting. You also increase your maximum number of followers by 2. So again, followers are that thing you may or may not be dealing with. And your summoner's kit gets, you can choose an additional ward and some other cool stuff. And then you get a 9 essence ability. Again, not a new minion, just a cool ability, which can be weird shit. Things like their pall shrouds all. It's one of the abilities. It's a maneuver instead of a main action, so that's cool. And you can use this ability as if in the space of one of your minions. And it's a 4-square burst. So basically everything within 4 squares of one of your minions is just weakened. And until the end of the counter, whenever a target gets a tier 1 result on a strike, they deal half damage. And if it was attempting to strike a target and they're adjacent to one of their allies, they target their ally instead. So effectively, you get to weaken them, save end. But for the rest of combat, anytime they get a low result, they do half damage. And they might accidentally hit their ally instead of hitting one of your allies. Which is, again, fascinating. Moving on. At 7th level, get another characteristic increase. You get another improvement to your minions. Effectively, more stamina. They can do. You can summon extra minions at the start of your turn. You get extra essence at the start of your turn. And then you have this interesting thing called Their Life for Mine. If you or an ally within your summoner's range would die from an effect that isn't age-related, you sacrifice all your active minions and spend all your essence as a free triggered action to bring the target back to life, reconstructing the damaged parts of their body with summoned materials related to your portfolio. The amount of stamina they get depends on how many minions you sacrifice for them. And you can only do that once per level, or once you get to max level, you instead of gaining experience, you gain this stuff called Eidos. So this is literally a one and done kind of ability, but it's an instant resurrection. So something bad happens in combat or just anywhere, and you're like, shit, someone's dead. You're like, and you have to spend literally everything you've got, but you get to bring them back from death instantly. That is a really interesting ability. Moving on. 8th level, this is where things get interesting. You get a perk. You get some features depending on your summoner circle. I'm not going to go into them, but we do need to talk about the Portfolio Champion. I mentioned this before. Portfolio Champion is basically a mega minion, but your champion refuses to be referred to as a minion. So this is your mega summon. This is the most powerful thing. You can only have one of them on the board added to the time, and if they die, you can't resummon them. You have to wait until another combat to do that. They cost 9 essence, and they are nonsense levels of interesting. They also don't have to belong to one of your squads, so they're their own thing. The 4 different things you can choose. If you are, and this is based on your subclass. So if you're a demon summoner, you get a demon lord's aspect. Effectively, a demon lord has gone, hey, I'm liking you. Here's a deal. I will let you summon part of my power as long as you use it to kind of like whatever they ingest. I get to deal with that. I like you. I think this is cool. So here's a cool thing for you to do. So that in and of itself is very interesting. It's a creature that's remarkably powerful. It can teleport. All these creatures, their stamina is equal to your maximum stamina. So it's basically like getting a second character. So that's one thing. I talked about this in the Lorehound section, but the elemental one is called a dragon's portent. Basically, this is the essence of a dragon that hasn't like birthed itself into an actual dragon that wants to team up with you. You get to summon a dragon effectively, but because it hasn't actually been born into the world, you get to choose how it manifests. So it might be a fire dragon, it might be a water dragon, it might be a poison dragon, whatever you want, and it does cool ass shit. For the Fae, they get a celestial attendant. Basically, celestials are like super powerful Fae creatures. They lend you one of their servants to do weird ass shit, because that's what the Fae summoner does. And then for the undead, you get an avatar of death. If that's not the coolest thing you have ever heard, I really don't know why I don't know why you're watching this video. It's crazy fascinating. You have killed so many things and sacrificed so many undead that death specifically is gone, you know, I should probably hang around. I'm going to be here anyway. Did you want me to help at all? Like, that's amazingly cool. So anyway, so that's 8th level, and it's amazing. Moving on. At 9th level, you get a few different things. You get a kit improvement. Again, it just kind of improves the basic stuff that your kit does. You get an additional ward. So again, remember, when you first chose your kit, you chose one of 4. I think it was level 5 or 6. You got to improve your kit again. You get to choose a second one. Now you're choosing a third one. And this is another thing where this idea of you choose one now, but later on you get to choose more. Basically what that turns into, because there's only 4 choices, you're going to get 3 of the 4. So the first one you choose is going to be the one that you like the most. And each one after that is going to be the one that is less bad. And your final choice right here at 9 is you're not really choosing the one that you want, you're choosing the one that you don't want. Again, anytime you're going to be giving players choices, bare minimum, there should be double the amount of choice options that they have choices to. Otherwise, it just turns into, I'm not choosing the things that I want, I'm excluding the things I don't want. And that always just feels bad. You feel like at lower levels, you feel significantly happier with your choices. And the higher your level gets, the less fun the choices are, because you've had this choice before and you've already chosen not to take that. Well, now that the real one you wanted is gone, well, now you have to kind of settle for one of the other ones you didn't want before. So I'm not a huge fan of that. And you also get some benefit to negotiations from things from the planes that you summon from. Then you also get an 11 essence ability. And these are kind of nonsense. Like the first one you get access to is called 10,000 Minions. It's a main action. Basically what it does, I'm just going to read it for you. Till the end of the encounter, or you are dying, each square on the ground is considered teeming with minions. An enemy that ends their turn in an effective square takes some damage, and the damage can't be reduced. Additionally, you can use Minion Bridge, treating each affected square as an eligible minion up to a specific maximum. So effectively, you can cast this, the entire battlefield in front of you is now full of whatever your minions are. So you're a demon summoner, suddenly there are just thousands of these little demons everywhere. They're crawling on everything. Anytime somebody wants to move, they're like, ah, nah, 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 nah. And you can just effectively shift your way through the battlefield whenever you want. Like, that is a nonsense level of ability. It is a 9th level ability. You're starting to become nearly a god at this point. So, yeah. And the rest of them are just as cool. I just thought that one was crazy. So, yeah. Moving on. At 10th level. So the interesting thing about Draw Steel, 10th level, you are supposed to be just nonsense levels of powerful. Think epic tier 4th edition, or like even more powerful than a 20th level character in D&D. That's what you're supposed to do. So you get a characteristic increase. Your minions get more powerful. You have the ability to just summon an extra NPC to help you guys out during respite. So every time you take a respite, you get to go, hey, you're going to help us now. Then you get perks and skill, and then you also get an epic resource. Every single class gets access to their own version of an epic resource. Basically what it is, the way leveling works in Draw Steel is every time you do something major, you win combat, you do a good negotiation, something like that, you get what's called a victory. The more victories you gain, the more of your heroic resource you start with at the beginning of combat. And there's certain classes where, depending on how many victories you have, when you use the ability, it'll become more powerful. When you take a respite, all of your victories turn into experience, and then when you start your next day, your victories are reset to 0, and then rinse repeat. That's how you level up your class. Once you get to level 10, you can't actually gain any more levels. And so what happens is your victories, instead of turning into XP, they turn into your heroic resource, which can be used for various things. For the summoner, it's called Eidos, and you can use it in place of your heroic resource. So that effectively means, unlike at earlier levels, once your victories went away, well, they turned into experience, which is nice, but they were no longer giving you extra heroic resources at the start of combat. This just turns into a permanent pool of extra heroic resources. And there are certain abilities that you earned at lower levels that can do extra things at level 10 if you spend some of this Eidos for it. So it basically just gives you an additional ability to use some of your most powerful abilities based on the victories that you had before your last respite. So, yeah. So that's the summoner. Moving on. The next section, rewards. So these are magic items. They call them treasures, and titles. So they have some new things like some new trinkets. This example, a first echelon trinket is the snake rattle bangle. Effectively, while wearing this bangle, your melee free strikes inflict frightened based on a potency. The potency increases by 1 if you have an edge on the power roll. And then if you're a summoner, you regain the use of your standard melee free strike while wearing this bangle. So effectively, when you're a summoner, you just have that summoner strike. You don't get to use a regular melee sister strike. Well, if you put this on, you can. And whether you're a summoner or not, anytime you make a melee free strike, you can frighten them, which is interesting. And that's kind of how most of this stuff is. Like, they start out with trinkets, which are like rings and bangles and stuff like that. Then they have what are called leveled treasures, which are kind of like your more traditional magic items that you like, magic weapons and armor and stuff that you would see in D&D. But depending on your level, they get cooler ass shit. Like one of them, the 33 Field Commander's baton. While wielding this baton at first level, you are imbued with the experience of the commanders who wielded it before you. Your magic or psionic abilities that deal rolled damage gain a bonus to their damage. On your turn, whenever you or an ally deal damage to a creature within a certain amount, you can immediately use your maneuver to slide the creature a certain amount. So this particular thing, and specifically, it has a special thing that if you're a tactician, you can wield the implement as if it had the light weapon keyword, meaning you could effectively dual wield it. And that's what you get instead of the magic or psionic stuff, because tacticians don't use magic or psionic abilities. When it gets to 5th level, higher damage bonus. And if you slide an enemy adjacent to one of your allies, the ally can either grab or knock back them as a free triggered action. And then at 9th level, again, more damage on your turn. Whenever you or an ally deal damage to a creature within 10 squares of you, you can immediately use your maneuver to slide this creature up to 3 squares, ignoring stability. Stability is a thing where anytime forced movement is used, you subtract your stability score from it. So if I'm supposed to move you 3 squares, but you have a stability of 2, I only move you 1 square. Well, with this thing, now, anytime you deal damage, you can slide a creature, which I mentioned before. Sliding creatures is really, really powerful and draws steel. You also ignore stability. And again, as a summoner, it's you or an ally. Well, your minions count as your allies. So, any one of your minions can be used to activate this ability. Your limitation is going to be you have to use your maneuver to be able to do the slide, but that's still really, really useful, and it gives you a lot of choice as to when and where you want to use it and how you want to use it. And again, there's lots more stuff. I'm not going to go through each one. Here's a few new titles. Again, I'm not going to go through each one. One of them it's called, it's a 3rd echelon title. It's called Ringleader. If you can complete 3 downtime projects during the same respite with the help of followers or minions, because your minions can do downtime stuff for you. The effect is you no longer need line of effect to give commands to any of your minions you can summon, which is exceptionally powerful for a summoner. And then some other stuff that happens there. So, interesting stuff. Moving on. The next chapter, Other Summoners. I mentioned before, you can have retainers. They have a few different retainers. They have the Devil Detective, which is a devil summoner retainer. And then a rival summoner, which is another minion or another retainer that you can have. So they're just effectively they're summoner. I'm going to try this one more time. They're summoner retainers. So if you wanted to have like a summoner join the team, but not like a full-on summoner, this is the retainer version of them. It's a lot more complicated than it really needs to be, but there's a bunch of different flavors of them. Yeah. Moving on. The next chapter, Summoner Advice. This is actually really, really useful. They have a section on 4 players, which basically talks to you about everything from like the role-playing aspects to it, how to use your minions outside of combat, and then they have an entire section on this is how combat works for the summoner, because it's going to work very, very differently than everyone else. And it's a lot of really useful stuff. And then they have a section called For Directors, where it talks about summoner story leads, basically stuff that's going to kind of link into the class fantasy of the summoner, and then specifically talking about how to challenge a summoner in combat. Because again, they're going to have access to a lot of different things. So good advice there. Then the final section, converting minions into monsters. This is an exceptionally useful thing, because it basically means all the different minions that we just finished looking at, all of those now can be turned directly into monsters that you can use against your enemies. So even if you don't have a summoner in the party, you have just expanded the number of monsters that you have by a pretty significant margin. So very cool. Moving on to final thoughts. I was not expecting this to take nearly as long as it did, but this is, again, a remarkably complex class. So talking about everything in it took a pretty decent amount of time. But that being said, I cannot tell you how interesting this class is to me. Again, from when I was a very, very young child, the idea of summoning elemental creatures I thought was the coolest thing ever. I really liked summoners in like Final Fantasy. I thought they were super, super cool, especially when they got to summon things like Ifrit and Rama and like those elemental creatures. There was this Sega game that I was obsessed with for a while, despite the fact that I never got a chance to play it until it's on the Switch Online thing now, so I can play it now. But basically what it was is called Beyond Oasis, and it was this kind of like Middle East themed, like Arabian Nights kind of themed adventure. But the thing that you could do is you had this dagger that you could charge up and then hit an elemental source and summon one of like 4 elementals to kind of fight with you. And I thought that was the coolest thing ever. But then when I got into TTRPGs, and I'm like, man, that would be such a cool thing to do. And I found out in most TTRPGs, summoners just suck. Like, finding a way to create a summoner that works in a TTRPG the way that they work in video games became a really big deal. And I gotta say, this is such a well-designed way to create not just a pet class, because pet classes exist in most TTRPGs. Like your ranger, whatever your ranger equivalent, a lot of times they're going to have an aspect of that allows it to be a pet style class. Even in the Essence 20 games, you can have robotic minions and stuff like that, or actual pets in like G.I. Joe. So pet classes are a thing, but that's just one additional creature. And that takes time and effort to be able to figure out a way to balance it correctly. But balancing an entire army for one player character is an exceptionally difficult thing for a TTRPG. And this did it so well. And I don't think this summoner class could exist in 5th edition or most other TTRPGs, because the rules that they created for minions and how they interact and how they share damage and all that stuff is intrinsic to the class working. And so even in Daggerheart, where they have a similar system for minions, it's not exactly the same, but there's some similarities to it. The Drawsteel version of it just works better, and this class is specifically integrated with that idea to actually create a usable and interesting summons-based class, a minion-based class. And again, I made an entire video talking about theoretically how might one go about this. And I'm not saying that Matt Colville watches my stuff. He doesn't. I will almost guarantee he doesn't. I sincerely doubt he even knows who I am. But a lot of the things that I mentioned in there are kind of dealt with in here. The idea that you can't, like, for a minion based class, you can't basically just give them access to 7 characters instead of 1. If you're creating minions, they have to be simple, they have to be fast, they have to be designed to just kind of work and go. And they do in this, and that's so impressive to me. Yeah, it absolutely blows my mind how interesting this is. So, anyway, that's going to be all for me today. As always, please remember to like the video, subscribe to the channel, hit the bell icon to turn notifications on. All those things are super, super important. In the comments down below, who is your favorite summoner in anything? Could be in literature, could be in television, could be in video games. Maybe they do have a summoner class in another TTRPG I'm unaware of that you think is super, super cool. But just let me know either who your favorite summoner is or who your favorite summon is. What is your favorite thing to watch, people summon as a summoner class? Are you a big fan of necromancers and big, like, bone golems or zombie hordes? Are you like me and you're like, fire elementals are the coolest things ever? It's fire, but it's a person. It's the perfect thing. Let me know in the comments down below. Otherwise, again, that is all for me today. I will see you guys in the next time. All right? Bye-bye.